Okay, Matt, thank you very much. And with more on the immigration issue, we toss things over to Raul. Raul?
Okay, Susan, thank you very much. There seems to be a new twist in the immigration debate every single day. The LA Unified School Board now wants all public school students to be taught that Arizona's new immigration law is un-American. Meantime, a new poll in USA Today shows 48% of voters say that they want an immigration law similar to the one in Arizona. Obviously, the immigration debate in full swing, hotly debated. Here to discuss potential impact here in San Diego, Congressman Brian Bilbray and Kevin Keenan, the regional director of the local ACLU. Gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us this morning. Before we get to the debate, I wanted to listen in first to something that the governor of Arizona said, Jan Brewer. Let's listen to that, and then we'll start talking about this.
We need to talk about it. You know, they can call it what they wish. But the fact of the matter is that, you know, 80% of the American people agree with me, agree with the state of Arizona, and I think it's important that the president and I sit down and discuss why it is important and explain to him exactly what it is that Arizona is feeling and the impact that it's having on our great state, and not only on the great state of Arizona, but certainly on America.
Obviously, the governor full support here. Now, Congressman, you chair the House Immigration Reform Caucus. You're going to be speaking with the governor first. What are you two going to be talking about here? And I guess, are you good preparing her for her discussion with the president, or how's that going to go?
Actually, I spoke to her last night and basically pointed out that, first of all, Arizona just implemented a program that 63 other local agencies have implemented with the grace of the federal government. So they've, you know, it's kind of disingenuous to attack one agency when you didn't, you had no concern when it was everybody else. The fact is 63 have already taken this step. The other thing was the fact that if the rest of the country had done what Arizona did 2 years ago, and remember, everybody was, the same people attacking Arizona now were attacking them 2 years ago when they said, let's implement the E-Verify. Let's require every employer to check the Social Security number and name matches on the computer. If we had done what they've done nationally, we probably wouldn't even be talking about this. And we went to the real source of the problem, and that's illegal employers, the people who are actually creating the draw that brings illegals here. We would be addressing that. I told her to bring that up. Mr. President, you want to do something about this? Let's make it a national program that the Congress is using and has used for years. And let me assure you, if Congress can use E-Verify, anybody can. So I talked to her about that, say, Mr. President, then join with us at going to the real problem. The border is not the problem is those employers, and implement E-Verify. Now, in all fairness, the President has mandated E-Verify for all federal contractors. But now it's time to go the next step and address the problem where the problem is, which isn't the border.
Okay, Kevin, I want to bring you in on this. What's your take on, what are you expecting, first of all, from that meeting with the President and the governor of Arizona?
I don't know. I know that there is a fair amount of support for the Arizona law, but to me that says that there's support for a solution to a problem that is yet to come from Washington. Mr. Bilbray and his colleagues haven't come up with a solution, and that's what Americans are yearning for. They're also yearning for a sense of community and opportunity and respect for our fundamental American values, and that's when they learn about the details of the Arizona law that they start to say, actually, we don't want that here.
I wanted to stay on that topic because every poll that we've had over the last week or so, it has said it's about 50% of Americans support the Arizona law, and sometimes that number is even higher. So how do you bring people together when it seems like most people are actually in support of it?
I think people want to send a message to Washington, and I hope that they are getting the message that there needs to be a solution. But when they learn that the Arizona law not just gives police officers a tool, it actually requires police officers to divert their time and resources away from protecting us against other crimes to checking for people's papers during traffic stops or when someone reports a noise ordinance violation, then they realize that this is unfair and un-American.
Congressman, let's bring you in on this because just yesterday the two smuggling boats washed ashore, La Jolla, Ocean Beach. States, federal government, who's in charge here? Who should be dealing with this immigration problem?
Well, the fact is Washington should not be having to provide amnesty to be able to do enforcement things, and that's one of the things we have to stop. But the boat's a good one. Operation Stone Garden. Local law enforcement. Our sheriffs are involved with that. We don't tell our law enforcement that you can't participate in interdicting drug smugglers. We don't tell law enforcement when there's a bank robbery that you can't show up, though it's a federal fund. But you've actually got cities and counties, and this is what it really comes down to. Yep. The Arizona law outlaws sanctuary cities. It eliminated the gag order that says you you cannot tell officers they cannot enforce the federal law when they have a reason to think there may be a violation, just like bank robbery, just like in Encinitas, when a drug smuggler brings up a ponga full of drugs, you don't tell the sheriff, or you have to look the other way. That's what's really different with this law, is it stops the politicians from telling law enforcement they can't do it. Now, you can say they require them to enforce the law, but I think most Americans say that's what all law enforcement is here for.
Kevin?
We also don't tell law enforcement that they have to put one set of enforcement over another. We let law enforcement decide what are the priorities. And this law is extremely dangerous in that it gives any person in Arizona the right to sue local government if that person thinks that the government isn't doing a good enough job. And that's a real problem. That's why you're seeing so many law enforcement executives come out strongly against this law.
Okay.
We would be diverting them from stopping sex offenders, you name it, in order to do paper checks on people driving through Arizona.
There's a lawsuit, ACLU involved obviously on SB 1070. Is it going to stand up in court, do you think? Because the words we're hearing, it's unconstitutional, social profiling. What's your take on this? Is this lawsuit going to happen? Is this lawsuit going to go through? Is it going to work?
Well, the congressman identified exactly why it's unconstitutional. In these other programs like 287G, where the federal government by its own grace has delegated this power to the states, that's one thing. In this case, the federal government hasn't delegated immigration enforcement to the state of Arizona, and that's why it violates our division of labor in the Constitution, which wisely gives immigration enforcement to the feds, except when they delegate it.
This, in addition to being a legal and political debate, this is also a personal thing with a lot of families that come over. But we have living right here in San Diego. I want both of you gentlemen to take a look and listen to this, and then we'll discuss this.
And I remember growing up, there was a domestic dispute between my mom and my dad, and we were afraid that if we called the police, somehow immigration would get involved, and my parents could be deported. So we never, growing up, anytime that we saw anything, anytime there was a domestic dispute, we never called police because we were afraid that we would be deported.
I want both of your takes quickly on this. Congressman?
Look, I grew up on the border. Anytime you have illegal activity of any form, you create these kind of problems. That's why the answer is not to sit there and say we're going to look the other way when there's criminal activity, but the fact that we need to address them and quit finding excuses not to enforce the law. The fact is that we have created an environment that encourages people to come here illegally. We send the wrong messages, and then when they're here, they find themselves in this catch-22. The fact is the catch-22 is being created by those who continue to say, let's not enforce our laws in a nation of laws and apply it appropriately. And, you know, it's interesting that people say separation of powers, but nobody wants to say that Arizona is implementing federal law consistent with federal law, as opposed to San Francisco or Los Angeles, which are specifically obstructing the enforcement of law and telling law enforcement they cannot implement something. They must be able to create a sanctuary environment that actually creates these situations where people, anytime you're illegal, you're not going to feel good about calling a police officer in. I don't care who
There's
you
always
are.
that underlying fear.
You're always, and no matter what kind of sanctuary city you create, that feeling is going to be there.
Okay, Kevin, I want you to chime in on what the lady here in San Diego just said.
It's a great example of what we as a community have to fear from this enforcement-only approach that folks, including Congressman Bilbray's Immigration Caucus, are insisting on. The fact is we have more than 12 million undocumented immigrants in this country. We can't realistically deport them all. There are mixed families. We would have to split up families in order to do that. We need realistic solutions. The public supports realistic solutions, and the Congress and Congressman Bilbray and his colleagues need to come up with them.
You know, we could go on for hours on this. Kevin Keenan with the ACLU and Congressman Brian Bilbray. Needless to say, this is going to have a major impact on the primary elections. Elections coming up in November. I'm sure we'll stay in touch with more.
Thank you very much.
Thank you both, gentlemen, for joining us this morning. And of course, we're following all these latest twists in the immigration debate right here on Fox 5. You can also get breaking news, read the actual text of Arizona's immigration law as well, and receive updates all by signing on to Fox.